my name is Vix and welcome back to my booktube channel Goddess of Gore, where I like to talk about horror, thriller, sometimes fantasy and occasionally sci-fi books every week. Today I'm talking about my very late March wrap-up. And why is it late? Well, I tell you, I got myself into a bit of a reading slump while I was reading an incredibly large The Darkness That Comes Before, and I had a case of the morbs, and therefore I didn't want to do anything, so I delayed everything, and I thought my March had gone terribly, but on reflection I had a wonderful reading month. So as usual, I will talk about the books in the order I read them, pick my top 3 and what I was surprised that I enjoyed at the end. So let's get on with it. So as usual, I read my book club pick of the month first, since book club is held on the first Thursday of every month, and I always leave it till the last moment so I can remember it and be able to recall it during our debates. And this last month it was What Kind of Mother Are You by Paula Daly. This was a thriller mystery about a missing girl told from the perspective of a harried working mother who runs a dog shelter and seems a bit too working class for the upmarket town she lives in, and from another perspective of a predator who is preying on young schoolgirls. At the start of every chapter we hear from the predator's point of view, while the rest of the time it's about how overworked poor Lisa was. Although this was a thoroughly enjoyable thriller, I didn't like the author's way she tried to make Lisa and her household seem normal. I found it a bit patronising from a working mother's point of view. Now, it's been a long time since I was a working mother of small children, but yes, working mothers are tired and we do get exhausted and frustrated, but forgetting children definitely isn't something a working mother would forget. And relying on your children to organise their own social lives and the important things around the house, again, not realistic. And quite frankly, if you do this, then you deserve to be blamed for a missing child. But I digress, as usual. It was more than just about missing children. It was about predators, paedophiles and the mentally ill. And if you want a fun, gritty little thriller mystery, this won't let you down. Next was the audiobook Tangleweed and Brian by Deidre Sullivan, a short story collection with feminist retellings of classic fairy tales, narrated by Aoife McMahon, which was wonderful. The story of Blackbeard was my favourite, and although I don't think I am sufficiently knowledgeable with the original, and from listening to this I don't seem to know a lot of these classic fairy tales, it seems, they were all fantastic. But personally I think these would be better read one at a time, like one a day, rather than one after the other, if I was going to read it again, since they all merged into the same story. And I think one in the morning for the 20 minutes or so that they lasted would have been perfect. After that I read Apt Pupil, a Stephen King short story. Again, this was brilliant. I cannot stress enough how good Stephen King is at short stories. And if you are struggling with Stephen's longer books, then you shouldn't give up with him completely, and instead you should 100% look at his shorter work. So this was a story about a very naughty boy who thought he had the cast iron stomach to be able to blackmail a neighbour about hearing of his crimes as a Nazi in charge of a gas chamber. What happens is this little sicko gets more than he bargains for, and instead he awakens the evil inside the both of them. Bravo, young man. Now, I have to say that this has a million trigger warnings, so tread carefully before getting into this one. I did not enjoy the animal scenes one bit, but the story itself was so good. Next was a book from my NetGalley backlist, and I am so annoyed that I didn't read this one as soon as I received it, because it was unbelievably amazing, and that is 7 Deaths of an Empire by G.R.Matthews. And I did go and buy a copy of my own when I needed a book order, but in the end my partner paid for this for me, and he is currently reading it. It's about nearly halfway, and I think he's just doing it to shut me up because I won't stop going on about it. So it was a fabulous book. It's told from 2 people's perspectives. The first is an ageing general who has seen many battles and many kings, and now is just waiting to retire, but he has to see through one more successor to the throne after his emperor has been killed. And the other is from an apprentice magician who, along with his master, has been given the task of protecting the emperor's body and travelling with it back to the kingdom in an entourage of soldiers and priests. Along the way we learn each of their backstories along with the inner workings of the kingdom and its citizens and the fractions it has among them, whilst at the same time there's a murder mystery, double crossings, secrets and lies. I know I can't do this story any justice, but just please believe me when I say how good it really was. It was amazingly brilliant, and if you enjoy backstabbing and mystery, then you will enjoy this book. There's some slight body gore for the gore whores among you. Next was another title with 7 in it, and that was The 7 Visitations of Sydney Burgess by Marino. And this was a mixed bag of a book for me. I think the first 60% of this book was creepy as hell, with not knowing what was happening, and it was all shadows in the corners and weird goings on. And then it all got a bit cosmic and trippy. I did describe it on Instagram as a horror book that's not like the other girls, and that's the best I can do. I still stand by that. It's about addiction, as though it's a living thing inside of you, which I guess addictions can be like that for some people, and a true battle of good and evil. And maybe deep down that is what this is about, addiction. It's a possession of you. Maybe? Or am I just reading too much into it? I don't know. I would still recommend it to people, and don't be put off by me saying the end of the book gets all weird, because it's superbly written, and so what if it gets all cosmic and sci-fi and weird at the end, right? It's still a weird, creepy book. After that, I went for a change of genre completely and went for the first instalment of a 2-book cozy mystery by Elle, Cosimano, and that Finlay Donovan is killing it. And this was brilliant. A proper gossipy girl gang mystery that completely sucked me in. It wrapped me up in a duvet, gave me a face mask and a manicure, and spat me back out. It was cosy, funny, romance, murder mystery, and for the few days I read it, I was totally there for it. So it follows a single mother, Finlay, and her 2 children, who is treated like absolute crap by her ex-husband, who has made it his business to take everything about Finlay and turn her into a useless woman who can't do anything for herself. She can't cope without him, so therefore is an unfit mother who is just flailing her arms around and drowning in the mess of his doing. A struggling author who's struggling to pay the bills, struggling to control her sassy daughter who thinks her father is the best thing since the invention of fire, and poor Finlay can't cope. Everyone doubts her and she's beginning to think they're right. So one day, after a particularly terrible morning, she meets up with her agent, who she has to pitch her novel to over breakfast. Overhearing half the conversation over there is a woman who's willing to pay to get rid of her husband, who's an absolute piece of crap, and she wants rid of him in a similar style to the concept that Finlay has just laid out. And she gets the wrong end of the stick and offers a whole bunch of money to Finlay to do the same thing for her. What ensues is a series of coincidence and farce, and gets her and her babysitter the reputation of a hit woman for hire. If you haven't already read this book, you simply must at once. Next was a book that I've been waiting for a while from my library, so I was on the wait list for a long time, and that was A House of 100 Whispers by Graham Masterton. This was a very easy to read book, and it would have been maybe slightly better if the author hadn't written such pathetic women. And please don't get me started on the gay women in the book, but it was a different take on the haunted house trope. If it did read with slightly offensive stereotype, it was still a fun horror with not called for offences. In fact, this did slightly read as a book that was written 30-40 years ago. So can I forgive the fact that it was written last year? Well, I'm not usually an offended person, but this book could be offensive to me if I cared enough about the author, and I don't, given his past writing history, and I'm talking about his journalistic days. I have no reference to his past novels, since this is the first of his that I have ever read. Enough of him. Anyway, on to the next book, and that was Finlay Donovan, Knox Dead, Book 2 by Elle Cosimano, and this book picks up a month or two from the ending of the first book. And I consider myself rather lucky that I read them pretty much back to back, because I didn't have to wait for the next instalment if I'd have read them on publication days. And I do think that these need reading close to each other. So it has pretty much all the same characters as the first book, so you don't have to learn any new characters, you don't have to meet any new people, and the shenanigans are the usual Finlay Donovan. And yes, the premise might have been the same coincidences and farces, but I didn't mind. It was funny, it was cosy, and her husband is still a complete arse. Yes, it just worked, and the friendship girl gang between Finlay and Vero, the babysitter, is strong, if not stronger, and I just loved it once again. It didn't seem like the author was pulling the same rabbits out of hats or letting off the same fireworks. Although I hope that Elle does try something new in the next book, because I'm pretty sure that I read that she wrote book 2 during lockdown and didn't have much to work off. So fingers crossed it's changed a bit for the next one. But I loved it, so I think you should read both of these books too at once. Then was my first DNF of the year, and I think I only DNF'd one book last year, so I'm hoping this is the only one this year. I do hate DNFing books, but when there's so many good books out there, I can't be wasting my time not enjoying a book just to finish the last page. And I didn't see this one getting any better, and that was The Things of Heaven and Earth by Michael Scott Hopkins. I gave this one until the halfway point, and I just couldn't go on any longer. The main character, Nick, who became Nate, whichever name he was going by at whichever point in the book, well, he was obnoxious. He was sexist. He thought he was Adonis or something. Thought all women, and possibly all men, who knows, wanted to sleep with him or be him. And he only had to click his fingers and look at a woman and her knickers fell off. But he got possessed by demons at various stages in his life, and they allowed him to murder everyone in the vicinity, including his own family when he was a child. And I will say that the opening, and by opening I mean the first chapter, so this is not a spoiler, the opening to the book was pretty good. He goes around on his motorbike to a pub and obliterates everyone in it while having a Dexter style plastic disposable poncho in his back pocket to not get blood on him. And I did think at the time, where else can this book go now? Well, after that it all got confusing, and he started having waking dreams where a female, possibly demon, who acted like she knew him would be at the beach and start talking to him. And I just didn't get it. I didn't get it at all. I tried, and I'm sure that this will be a fantastic read for somebody, but not me. The Nick Ghostbuster guy, who I thought was going to go around and bust some ghosts in these ghost towns. Spoiler, he didn't up to where I got to, was just not someone I could get on with. He was a misogynistic creep and a Shelley show-off, and I wasn't on board for that. So I gave up. I am sorry to the author and the publisher and NetGalley, because I did request it from NetGalley expecting to enjoy the book. And as I said, I hate DNFing, but I was seriously scratching my head at what was going on. So yeah, sorry, my battery went. So as I was saying, I hate not finishing books. And anyway, I think that book broke my mojo a little bit, because after that I was struggling and I slowed right down. It was getting towards the end of the month. The weather in the UK was bloody freezing. We entered a micro ice age, I think, and so did my reading. I had 2 small books and 2 massive books still to go, and I chose, of course, something small to read, and that was The House at the Bottom of the Lake by Josh Malerman. And boy, oh boy, was this great. So if you've read this book, you have to tell me what you thought of the ending. What do you think it meant? I know what I think about it, because after I wrote about it on Goodreads, I changed my mind. I thought the ending was stupid, but now I think it was brilliant. But I'm not too sure if what I think is what everybody else thinks. But anyway, this book creeps me out. Nothing scary happened in it, but it unnerved me. It set me on edge, and I tried to describe it, but whenever I do, it doesn't sound even remotely scary. But basically, it's about an older boy and a girl who go out on a date. While they're canoeing on the lake, they find another secret lake through a tunnel, and under the secret lake is a house that is perfectly intact, with furniture and clothes. So what's so scary about that? Well, it was the wet footprints on the raft that they built. It was the clothes floating around, and it was the eyes in the window, or was it a fish? Seriously, it was creepy without being creepy. Read it and tell me it wasn't creepy. And by the way, these kids were so well written. The atmosphere, impeccable. And Josh Malerman is a terrific writer, so start with this if you haven't read anything by him before, and I'm sure you won't be disappointed one single bit. Then it was the last audiobook of the month, and that was The Starless Sea by Erin Morganstern, and it was narrated by a full cast. There was Dominic Hoffman, who was the wonderful voice of Zachary, Diane Graham, who has the voice of Velvet, who reads from the book of Sweet Sorrows, the sassy voice of Barney Turpin, who reads from The Secret Diary of Katrina Hawkins, Fiona Hardingham, who reads from the book The Ballad of Simon and Eleanor, Alan Cordiner, who reads from the book Fortunes and Fables, and finally Georgina Marie, who read from Another Place, Another Time. And these were all books within this book. Honestly, this book was immersive and immense. I can see why it's a favourite for so many, and for me, I don't think that without that full cast doing the reading, I would have enjoyed it so much. It is a long book and it is confusing, but it was so good. I loved the stories within the book. I think that was my favourite part. I loved the characters of the main book. I loved Katrina trying to find out what happened to her friend. Everything. So it starts with Zachary as a young boy who finds a painted doorway in an alleyway by his mother's shop. He hovers with his hand on the wall. Should he open the door? But he doesn't, and he carries on with his childhood as the son of a fortune teller. Then at college he finds this weird book, this old strange book in the library. When he starts to read, it contains that one moment of his childhood that describes himself standing in the alleyway, hovering over a doorway, which sets into action some unwanted attention from some bad guys who also want this book. So with the help of a few equally strange characters, he opens doorways that lead to weird and wonderful places of magical worlds. But within this book are the books he finds along the way, and they were the best part of the whole story. I'm not going to say it's the best book for me, but I did enjoy it. But did I just enjoy it because of the narrators? Because they were the real stars and brought the book to life for me. Anyway, then I read Junk, and wow, what a tale of woe this was. So I have this copy, but the copy I had from NetGalley of the book last year, it was the 20th anniversary edition, and it could have been written yesterday. It's still so relevant. It's about two teenagers who are in love. The boy is in love with the girl, but the girl is more in love with the thought of being a runaway and just needs a reason to do it. She's a typical teenager, doesn't want to be controlled by her middle-class parent, but the boy is in a terrible situation at home and just can't see any other way to remedy it than to get away. So he runs away to Bristol and finds a squat to live in, and then she comes along and it all goes to shit. Sorry to say it, but it does. Before long, Tar and Gemma are both heroin addicts and in a mess. And this story is all about how easy it is to fall down that path and how quickly your morals and standards of living fall with it. There is prostitution, homelessness, squalor, addicted babies, abortions, you name it, it's in this book. And I'm not sure how this book translates into other countries' drug problems, but it does sum up life in Britain and its drug use to me. It is a YA book, so it doesn't dwell on things for long, but it does paint a pretty grim picture, but has enough hope at the end. It's been described as train spotting for kids, and I can't think of a better way to describe it. There was talk of this book being banned when it was released, but I don't think that was actually followed through with, and it is part of the curriculum in schools today in the UK. And also, I did say when I was doing my TBR that this was called Junkie in the US, but I got it wrong. It's called Smack in the US. And I thought it was such a good book that I do think is important for kids' education still, and unfortunately probably will be for some time. You can just substitute heroin for the latest drug of choice, to be honest. And then the last book, and I'm going to cheat with this because I didn't finish it in March, I finished it a week into April, but it was on my March TBR and I make up the rules, so and this was book 1 of the Prince of Nothing series by R Scott Bakker. Was The Darkness That Comes Before. Now, if I had to describe this author, it would be the Stephen King of dark fantasy, because he does like his words. Are they necessary? Maybe, maybe not. It's a very wordy book, and it does deter me from the story, because this is just the setup book. It's a travelling book, as a lot of fantasy seems to be, i.e. a bunch of different groups of people are all going to the same place, and we get to know them along the way. In this one though, they kill and murder and kidnap a bunch of other people who get in their way. Some of the gang are lost and some are joining up with other gangs to form a merry bunch with horses and an army. So as I said, this is just a setup book, but there was some gore and murders to keep me entertained. But I did have a problem with the female characters, surprise, surprise. They seem to have been written by someone who didn't seem to know women. I understand that this is a fantasy and therefore one could argue that these females are not the same as the females we know. So I'll let it slide until I read book 2. It was a bit of a boring book at almost 650 pages. How was it not going to be? But I was not put off enough to not continue with the series. And then I have to explain about this book, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I did forget about it because I didn't write it down on my list, so it didn't happen. I didn't get to read it. I will try to get to it as soon as possible. I may use one of the readings on YouTube that are available and do a bit of a read along if I have time. And I only just found it at the bottom of my TBR trolley when I was getting those books out, so we'll see. But if not, I'll just keep rolling it along until I get to it. So that's it. What was the top 3 then? Play the music. This was a hard one this month because I read a lot of good books and they were almost all 4 and 5 stars. But at number 3, it's gotta be Junk by Melvin Burgess. This was a fantastic book and I loved every minute of it. So, number 2. I'm going to choose Apt Pupil by Stephen King. Again, I was completely immersed in the novel, but it really repulsed me at times. So, winner. And then number 1, 7 Deaths of an Empire by G.R.Matthews. It was brilliant. I had a complete cast of actors in my head from Willow, Game of Thrones, Gladiator, How to Train Your Dragon. So I am ready to make the movie if anybody's interested in me casting it. And the biggest surprise of the month, drumroll, Finlay Donovan is killing it. I wasn't expecting too much and I got slapped by it. It owned me. I'm not sure what I'm saying. I'm trying to sound like a 20-something and failing. I am so sorry this wrap up took so long and I had a lot to say and then seemingly nothing to say about all of the books I read. But thank you so much for watching and sticking around. I hope you were encouraged to read some of these books, or maybe just to try something you wouldn't normally pick up. I do hope to see you again soon, and please like and subscribe if you want to. If not, that's fine. But do remember to have a few minutes outside today, and if you are able to visit your library, it would love to see you. The librarians miss you terribly. Until next time, bye bye.